she gave me my money back. Then she told me that she loved me, and she gave me my money back. And now, please welcome the CEO of Green for All, Bien Truong.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. You guys are early birds. You guys are in it to win it. I am so glad because we're in for an important conversation, and we need people who are in it with us. And the first thing I should say is we are going to be in it with some of the most amazing leaders of the world. And as the CEO of the Dream Corps, our mission is to close prison doors and to open doors of opportunity. And for me, thank you. For me, this is an issue that is personal. I'm the youngest of 11 kids, raised in Oakland, California, right? Just across the bridge, but one of the poorest and most polluted communities in Oakland. So for me, this is a personal issue. And so I am so proud to be your masteress of ceremonies today, and to bring on stage some of the people who I've worked with, who I've partnered with, who I've been following and fangirling of, and now I get to kind of highlight and support their work. And the first person to come on stage is our Attorney General of California. Yes, Attorney General Xavier Becerra has been leading the charge to protect all Californians from the effect of the federal rollback of environmental and health standards. He has been leading the charge to protect Californians through his appointed and elected office. In each of his leadership positions, Attorney General Becerra has championed the state's economy by promoting and addressing issues impacting jobs, generating industries such as healthcare, clean energy, technology, and entertainment. He has served 12 terms in Congress. While in Congress, he was the first Latino to serve as a member of the powerful Committee on Ways and Means. He served as chairman of the House Democratic Caucus and was a ranking member of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Social Security, where he has fought tirelessly for working families. Born in Sacramento, California, he is the son of working parents, just like I was, and he is the first in his family to go to college, just as I was. So it is my big honor to welcome him to stage. Please give him a big round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Morning. May I ask real quickly, how many of you are not from California? Oh my gosh. You're the ones that have a right, given your jet lag, to not have to get up. We're all the San Franciscans and all the Californians. All right, there we go. Okay, in the house, in the house. How many are not from the United States of America? Thank you very much for coming to visit. We hope you enjoy. I hope you flew over Washington, D.C. directly to San Francisco, so that way you could have a good time in the United States. I want to say thank you to Bien. Actually, I want to say thank you as well to Governor Jerry Brown for pulling together all of us to talk today about something so crucial and reminding people throughout this country, especially in Washington, D.C., that we will continue to lead in the fight to heal our planet and to make sure that we understand the impact of climate change on all of us. And so I want to say thank you to Jerry Brown for being such a leader for not just our state, not just our country, but for the planet as well. In the United States of America, we know the planet is warming, whether it's because of those mammoth hurricanes that are coming through, whether it's the record wildfires that we're facing here in California, or whether it's the 90-degree weather that San Francisco is facing even in the summertime when it's supposed to be its coldest. We understand that the climate is changing. In the United States of America, we must accept our share of responsibility for a warming climate, but we in California, we do not and we will not take responsibility for all the unwanted hot air blowing out of Washington, D.C. when it comes to this particular issue. In California, we don't just believe that it's our responsibility to fight climate change. We're doing it. Why else would Governor Brown sign legislation that is now law that makes California 100% reliable on clean energy starting in 2045? And we will make sure that we are carbon neutral by 2045. And remember, we're not just any state. We're the biggest state in the nation. Why else would the California Department of Justice take Donald Trump to court 23 times to defend our planet? We've gone to battle over the Clean Power Plan, over our national vehicle emission standards, even to fight for common sense energy efficiency policy for America. And we're doing much, much more. We've secured so far 14 victories in those lawsuits, and we haven't lost a case yet against Washington, D.C. In California, we like to say we're fighting and winning, and winning for our people and our planet. In California, we say, if you want to go green, you'd better go blue. And fortunately, we're not the only ones pulling our country and our world forward and healing the planet. In the United States, too often we think an environmentalist means the person who's driving in that electric vehicle, when in fact we neglect the 20 people who are riding in the bus. Hardworking people around the globe, people of modest means like my parents, are some of the best conservationists in the world because they can't afford not to be. They're not using the air conditioner and all those great systems we have in America to cool or heat their homes. They don't vacation in the hotels here in San Francisco. They sleep like I did in the back of the truck in the camper shell with your 3 other sisters, and you think it's an adventure when you do it that way growing up. Hardworking people are the ones telling their kids, apaga la luz. Turn off that light when you leave that room. They're the ones that say, clean up that plate. Don't serve yourself more than you're going to eat. It's too precious. They're the ones that aren't making those unnecessary trips in their cars, if they're fortunate to even own one. The numbers show that low-income folks are our best environmentalists. In the U.S., low-income households generally use about 1/5 the energy of their wealthier counterparts. Most Americans don't realize this, but our average carbon footprint, it's about 16 metric tons per year. California, which, by the way, is #1 in manufacturing, #1 in agriculture, #1 in autos, is leading the pack in this country when it comes to reducing that carbon footprint. We're somewhere around 11 metric tons. Still too much, but less than the 16 metric tons per year of our brethren throughout the country. But then you got to consider the rest of the world. Indonesia, well, its footprint is about 8 times smaller than America's. Colombia's, some 10 times smaller than America's. Nigeria's, more than 30 times smaller than America's carbon footprint. Now, no country or people has a monopoly on good ideas or conservation. The ancient Romans gave us composting. The Incas invented freeze-dried foods. There's a Polish-Israeli engineer who developed drip irrigation. A 24-year-old Kenyan built a shoe that can charge your cell phone as you walk. A Colombian who designed a system to reuse water from showers. But we should agree on something. Lower-income people face more than their fair share of pollution and health hazards, and they are hit first and worst by climate change. In California, the top 10% of communities most impacted by pollution are overwhelmingly communities of color. More than 18% of Latinos and 17% of African Americans in our state reside in one of those communities that's hardest hit, compared to less than 3% of our white brothers and sisters. That's why at the California Department of Justice, we established an Environmental Justice Bureau for California and for them. Our team of attorneys is working day in and day out to protect the most vulnerable from pollution. And we're making a difference. In nearby Oakland, we supported an ordinance prohibiting the storage and handling of coal and petroleum coke. In Southern California, in the Jurupa Valley, we helped ensure that its residents would be protected from air pollution spewed by dirty diesel trucks going back and forth on a daily basis right next to schools and homes. In the Central Valley of California, in Arvin, we secured an ordinance that requires new oil and gas sites to be located more than 300 feet from residences and schools, hospitals, and parks. We all have more to do to bring all environmentalists to the table. For many of you, it was an absolute certainty that you would be here at this summit. But for some of you, it was an absolute sacrifice to make it here. There are some pretty impressive people around the table here today, but we need to always ask ourselves, who isn't at the table? Those are the people who can be our greatest allies in the environmental movement because they already are our best environmentalists. I hope you will keep engaging with the vulnerable communities around our world. You will keep going to them for solutions. We can't afford these days to have free riders when it comes to healing our planet. Freeloaders are not an option in this country or in this world anymore. And we can't afford, as well, to leave anyone on the sidelines as we work together to fight climate change. And remember, you heard it first here from the Attorney General of the state of California, the first Latino to have that opportunity, the first in my family to have a chance to go to college, the first to have been born here from parents who came from Mexico. Remember this. In California, it's not just about fighting. It's about winning. And that's what has to be our motto. We fight and we win for our planet. And let us include every single person who is the best environmentalist in that fight. That's the way we win. Thank you all very much for being here. Enjoy the rest of this week's summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Becerra. Wasn't that wonderful? Yes. Are you guys charged up? Yes? You're going to be so much more charged up now because what we know is that in order for us to do all the things we need to build a more just world, we need to have more people coming to helping us to create that economy, to create solutions for ecological disaster. And what we also probably know is that women run the world, right? If you don't know that, you're in the wrong place. And so I am so proud to introduce our panel next of all women who are changing the world one community at a time and as a whole together. So first coming to the stage will be Ine Begay. She is the co-founder, founding director, and now board member of the Black Mesa Water Coalition, an indigenous-led, yes, thank you, an indigenous-led environmental justice organization in the Southwest of the United States. She is Diné and Dana'arum. She is of the Diné and Dana'arum nations and is married into the Gwinnett Nation. She is currently the executive director of the Native Movement, an Alaska-based grassroots nonprofit organization leading advocacy around indigenous peoples' rights and the rights of Mother Earth. She has spent almost 20 years engaging in solution building with multi-stakeholders in areas of energy, water, and economics. Please welcome her to the stage. Next, we have the founder of the Zero Hour Movement. She's 16 years old, so be nice. But Jamie Margolin is a fierce climate justice advocate who's been working tirelessly in the last few years to move her home of Washington State to adopt common sense climate change laws, frustrated by the inaction of federal elected officials, and in fact, that youth voices are almost always ignored in the conversation around climate change. She has been taking over the world by storm. Welcome her to the stage. Next, we have Mia Yoshitani. She's the executive director of the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, APEN. She has extensive background in community organizing and has blazing the way across the country. APEN has been fighting and winning environmental struggles for the past 18 years and continue to be one of the most unique organizations by explicitly developing the leadership and power of low-income Asian American immigrant and refugee communities. Welcome to the stage. Sheila Patel is the founder and director of the Society for Promotion of Area Resources Centers, SPARC. It's an NGO that has been working since 1984 to support community organizations of the urban poor in their efforts to access secure housing, basic amenities, and seek their right in the city. She has been widely recognized nationally and internationally for her work in seeking attention to the issues of urban poverty, housing, infrastructure, to the radars of government, bilateral and international agencies and foundations and other organizations. Welcome to the stage. And finally, Victoria Talu-Corpus is an indigenous leader from the Kankanai Igorot people of the Cordillera region in the Philippines. She has helped to build indigenous peoples movement across the community to fight for the projects of against the Marcos dictatorship, such as the Chico River Hydroelectric Dam, Selophil Resources Corporation. She is the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous people. Welcome to the stage. I had to abbreviate their extensive resumes and bios. My apologies, but it's because I want to make sure that they have the right and space to speak. So maybe what I'll do is have them share with us more information around what they have been tackling and doing in the last few years, and how have you been helping to build a more just environment?
Thank you. Yat shene bge dashjenet khachini neshle do tojini bashichin do shanta shanala. Say thank you for inviting me here. I come from two Arizona tribes, but I also live now in Alaska, where my kids are rooted in the peoples of the North. And I also want to just give thanks also to the Ohlone people of this land, who have been, their ancestors were the caretakers of this land, and they continue to be the caretakers of this land. And I just want to point to, I think, all the work that we're doing wherever we're at, recognizing that the indigenous peoples of those lands are still there, right? And that's some work that we all need to be carrying in whatever format we're working in, whatever sphere we're working in. In recognizing the indigenous peoples of those territories, we're recognizing that history of colonization, and we're recognizing that there is a knowledge that has been there. There's a place-based knowledge. There's traditional knowledge that it's not just traditional knowledge, it's indigenous science. Science that for generations and generations helped keep our environment and our people in balance. And that knowledge, through this history of colonization, has been severely threatened. And so in the work that I do, we do a lot of community organizing, both in Arizona and in Alaska. And I just came from a community, back in December, I was in a community off the coast of Alaska, Nome, where in December there was no ice on the ocean, on the Bering Sea. And the hunters were worried because what will happen is it'll be slush. And that's the most dangerous ice to be on, to hunt. The grandmothers were crying, saying that the marine mammals were in trauma, And then you go to the Gwich'in territories of the other side of Alaska, where the last 5% of the North Slope of Alaska has just been mandated to be oil and gas development, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And that is the birthing ground of the porcupine caribou, the food source of the Gwich'in people, my kids' people. And so what has been happening in our communities in Alaska and in Arizona has been the people who are living in those areas have been not heard, right? We're getting all these development. We have had to take matters into our own hands and start collaborating together, raising our voices together to change the dynamic. So what we've done in Alaska is really taken some very conservative thinking where we didn't necessarily talk about oil and gas development in Alaska. It's very much a hush-hush thing since we're very much an oil and gas state. But by the power of the people, we've been able to elevate that conversation and really push our elected leaders to make some steps towards speaking at least about climate change. Yep.
Thank you. Jamie, can you say a little bit more about the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, so I should be in class right now. I'm a junior in high school, and I flew all the way here from Seattle to be here because I am here representing Generation Z. I am the founder and executive director of Zero Hour, a youth climate action organization that recently organized the first ever youth climate march in Washington, D.C. and 25 other cities around the world, because my generation, especially youth like me under voting age, are at this very strange point in time in that we are inheriting the worst of the climate crisis, but we're so young we can't vote. I will not be able to vote in the midterm elections, and so we get to inherit the worst of it, but we don't have a say in the people who are put in place to solve it. We don't have a say in who our leaders are, and so the people who I see in positions of power are not people who represent the needs of my generation, are not people who a lot of times even have our generation's best interest in mind. And so what I'm here at this summit to do, I'm the youngest speaker at this summit, and I'm here with my organization, Zero Hour, because this is 0 hour to act on climate change, and we the youth are calling that urgency. We're here to make sure and remind the leaders and people of power who they're supposed to be fighting for. These conferences, every action that is taken, every decision that is made, you should be thinking about your children and the youth like me who don't have any power in society, but are going to be paying the price for whatever our leaders do. So I'm really here representing my generation, and Zero Hour, what we do is we empower young people to take action.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Mia, APEN has been fighting and winning across this country for so long. Can you share with us a little bit of what you guys have been working on?
Sure. First, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone, all the work that these courageous women are doing on this panel. And I just wanted to call out Jamie. I have a daughter who's the same age, and we've been out in the streets, APEN, our members, and tens of thousands of frontline community members all week, talking about the same solutions that APEN has been trying to fight for and build power for in immigrant and refugee communities here in the Bay Area, around the state of California, for climate solutions that work for frontline communities, the people who are most impacted by the extractive industry, and for the solutions that are coming out of those communities. So we've been fighting for 25 years to build power in our communities for the kinds of solutions that bring, clean renewable energy into our neighborhoods, that bring clean water, food on our tables for our kids that's healthy to eat, affordable housing, transportation that's accessible, all these types of solutions that are actually the solutions that we need to address the climate. The ones that are actually working in our communities are the ones that are going to work across the world for actually addressing the crisis. And we're centering the leadership on the people who are most impacted, and those are the people who have the right solutions.
Yay. Round of applause, please. And Sheila, you have been doing this work globally. Mia talked about the global impact of some of the things that they want to do and win right now. You've been doing this work globally and have been recognized appropriately for your work. Can you say a little bit more about what you're doing?
First of all, I want to say that it's not by accident that we are all women sitting here.
Yes.
The reality is that in all circumstances where people live in very impoverished and disenfranchised conditions, it's always women who take the lead. So I want to congratulate all of you.
Absolutely.
And my young friend. You give me hope. So I come here to talk on behalf of billion slum dwellers. They say that 1 in 7 urban population lives informally. And in the global south, where most of our members are, they have lived almost 3 generations in terrible conditions, facing evictions, facing a denial of the right to live in the city, and to be treated like trash. And part of the reason that we have created this global movement as Shack Dwellers International in 33 countries and 500 cities, which is a drop in the ocean in terms of the extent of urbanization that is happening. We believe that in the 21st century, we need new strategies and new forms of transformative development investment if we are going to achieve both the Sustainable Development Goals and our climate change goals. And the fact is that all up till now we are being locked up in projects, cute little water for 25 households, houses for 45 people, small projects that all of us get trapped in. When in reality, we want to work in partnership with cities and their organizations, with our provincial and national governments and our global institutions to produce solutions that don't take 20 and 30 years, which is what it's taking us to do right now. And so we're here because we share this common obsession of scaling up solutions that are clear for us where we sit, but somehow don't reach decision makers and resource providers and technology producers who keep dumping stuff on us that doesn't work for us. So a lot of what I have come here to say is wake up, you're all powerful people. We're also very powerful in terms of the volume of people we represent. So look for handshakes and look for solutions with us, not for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of powerful, I can think of no one more. You're fighting dictatorships, you're organizing in the community, you're working with people. You have been at the forefront. I'm gonna just be quiet and listen to you tell us, what are some of the things that you are most excited about these days?
Well, I think the things that I am most excited about is the continuing empowerment happening in indigenous communities and also in local communities. I am a firm believer that that if we will solve this problem of climate change, we really need to strengthen the capacities of communities to contribute and to reinforce their contributions to the solutions. And I say this because I work in an institution that does training and community organizing amongst indigenous peoples. We have partners across the world in 13 countries, and we have seen the results of when indigenous peoples know what their rights are, they believe and they gain the confidence in the systems that they have in their own communities. They will be able to contribute significantly to the problem. And the research now, the evidences show that in the world today, the best kept forests are in indigenous territories, despite all the violations of their rights and the displacements from their territories. So I think that's, and it has been estimated that 300 million tons of carbon are found in this forest. This is like 33 times the emissions in 2017. So that's the kind of contribution, one of the contributions that we have. And I think that what really inspires me most is to see these communities rising up and doing what they need to do. But I'm also the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples, of which I'm mandated to monitor the situation of indigenous peoples, how their rights are violated, as well as the good practices of both governments and indigenous peoples in strengthening their communities. So this is something that also urges me to gather all the information to show and to make visible to the world.
Thank you. And I want to pick up from there and ask a question to Jamie, because we're talking about helping to build power in communities, helping people rise up. You're here. I'm glad you're skipping school for this. It's the right thing to do. And yet, as we're talking about helping people speak up, have power, at 16, you're not even granted yet the right to vote. And so can you tell us a little bit about how are we able to help push towards a more just world, a world that your generation, Generation Z, is inheriting, and what can we do better to help make sure that the youth is part of the voice, is part of the power, is part of the building of the future?
Yeah, well, one thing that I like to say is that, young people, again, we did not, when I look around at this conference, I see no one that looks like me. But then another thing is, and I'm happy to be here and I'm so grateful for this opportunity, but I shouldn't have to be here. A lot of people, they talk to me especially after the Youth Climate March, we made headlines, everyone was like, oh my God, give the kids everything, take over everything. We're just gonna sit back and let the kids do it. And I'm like, I'm trying to survive high school here. This is not my job.
Yes, this is not your job.
And then I'll talk to politicians who have all this money and all this power to make the solutions, and they're sitting there oh, you're cute, keep doing what you're doing. And I'm like, you change it. You have the money, you have the power. I'm a broke high school student. Stop putting it on me. And youth like me. So, I mean, one of the things that definitely needs to happen is for adults to stop pushing everything onto the young people, because this is the worst present ever that older generations have left for us, and not just anyone from older generations, but the people in power. In Zero Hour, we talk a lot about how you can't just slap a solar panel on the climate crisis to solve it. You have to, the systems of oppression that cause the climate crisis are what we have to dismantle. It's so much more than just what's on the surface. And with the amazing Indigenous women I'm here today, colonialism is a huge cause of the climate crisis. Racism, poverty, all of these systems intersect. And so I'm here especially, and the work that I do with Zero Hour, we're majority women of color led. I acknowledge my privilege as a white passing person. My mom is an immigrant from Colombia, South America. My dad is a white Jewish person here. But I see a few of my members just came in the room. We're a majority women of color-led organization, and the reason why this is important, and young women, most of us are under voting age, the reason why this is important is that at Zero Hour and the work that we're doing, we the young people see through the BS. We see through the political BS. I can tell when you're lying, and I can call you out because you can't call me, if I say you're being corrupt, you can't call me back and you're like, yeah, well, you are too. No, I'm not.
Amazing.
So that's really why I'm here, and that's what's really important, is for us to acknowledge the biggest thing that you're taking away is that you can't just slap a solar panel on this issue. We have to dismantle the systems of oppression that caused it.
What? Yes, Jamie Margolin, 2020. She won't be able to vote, but let's see if she can run for office. We talked about the unfair burden on youth, but there are communities that have an unfair burden on them, especially communities that are low income, communities of color, and you have been helping to build powers so that we can rise up. So can you say a little bit more about what you have seen that communities want and don't want?
Yeah, first I just got to take a moment and say, again, I mean, look at this. This gives me hope.
I'm not alone.
It gives me so much hope. This is the kind of conversation I have with my kids at the table. So it makes me almost, I'm overwhelmed because she just said all the things that I was going to say, so I don't need to say them. But it's true, absolutely. The systems. It's a systemic problem. This is a problem that is so much less a technical problem and so much more an economic, a political, and a values problem. And that's what we have to focus on. We have to focus on the systemic changes to our economy, to our politics, to our democracy, and to our values, and what are we centering on? So in terms of what frontline communities actually want, I think I mentioned some of the solutions that we're talking about. Yes, we want clean, renewable energy. Yes, we want water, food systems that support our families, that are regenerative, support regenerative economies in local communities. And we want industry to stop poisoning us. It's pretty simple. We have such a huge opportunity in this moment as as we are committing as countries, as a world, to reduce climate emissions, stop the shell games, stop trading away the right to pollute, stop offsetting pollution, and reduce pollution at the source. We want to see reductions. We want to see significant reductions. We want to see aggressive regulations that actually reduce greenhouse gases at the smokestack. Keep it in the ground, folks.
Yes. Oh, yes. All right.
If you want to solve climate, listen to the communities who are facing this poison every single day. Reduce emissions at the source and build sustainable systems in those communities that work for those communities.
Thank you. All right, I want to turn to, yes, please do. Ine, can you pick up from there, what do you see that reflects back to the indigenous communities of the country, and what can we do more as you see it?
Yeah, well, as indigenous peoples, I mean, we're now a small percent of this country, but we are still caretakers of over 40% of the resources of this country. And a lot of our peoples are in rural settings, right? So we're in these rural places where there's also a lot of conservative thinking. And we are coming up with solutions despite the fact that there's all this pressure to take the resources out from under our communities. And I think the thing from Navajo to Alaska to across Turtle Island here, we've got to keep those resources in the ground. There's no way to reach the climate, to keep the climate catastrophe down and to address it without keeping those resources, oil and gas and coal, in the ground. And we cannot, and we cannot just trade the pollution to another area. When we're trading pollution credits, that means the companies that are in our communities, and from Alaska to Arizona to the Amazons, they're the ones that are continuing to get impacted. And so we really need the regulators, our city elected officials, our state officials to realize that carbon neutral, what does that mean? I need more specifics to what carbon neutral means, because carbon neutral just means maybe you're taking something from one place and moving it to another place, and it's a mathematical equation. It doesn't work for us on the ground. It doesn't work for indigenous communities across this Turtle Island.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And Sheila, if you can pick up from there, I know that you've been doing a lot of thinking and work globally around how do we not only rise up, but if you can explain how that also connects to the work you're doing around youth dividends.
When I hear you talk, it reminds me of the biggest concern that older women in informal settlements have. We have all our politicians talking about the youth dividend of the Global South. Our women are saying that in the absence of good quality education, health, the right to the city, the right to be part of the process, not to constantly face the threat of evictions, this dividend is going to become a disaster, because our children, our young children, are global citizens. They may live in informal settlements. They all have second and third-hand smartphones, and they see the same stuff that kids in better-off homes do. So they feel a sense of entitlement which their cities are not giving them. And there is nothing more devastating than the anger of youth that can destroy the economics of the city. When I say this to politicians, they say, oh, you're exaggerating. But there have been so many situations where we've seen that the main group of people who destroy city poverty, burn buses, are young people who are so angry, who cannot manifest their anger through institutional forms, which you have managed to do. And that's dangerous. So the real challenge for us really is that due to all the reasons that we've talked about, 30 to 70% of people living in cities don't have secure tenure. That comes out of plannings of cities in which the requirement of this large population is ignored, and you have 3 and 4 generations of people who live without water, sanitation, in flood areas, and facing eviction. So they are in this leaky bucket syndrome all the time. And so what we are doing is, after so many years, we've actually now got a situation where city governments, some very few smart city governments, are actually looking at us to co-produce solutions that they have not been able to do themselves. And through this process, we now have community leaders in all these cities who are willing to share the little successes that they have and learn. And so, for instance, I was on a panel 2 days ago with the mayor of Durban. We've been facing evictions in Durban since '92, since even when majority rule came. But it is last week that, through the help of C40, we actually produced a memorandum of understanding that would address development and resilience-linked solutions for the 35 to 40% people who live in Durban. And there are 2, 3 other fantastic solutions. But the point is, we can't go at that pace. We need every mayor. And if you're an aide to the mayor, then tell your mayor. If you have ears of anybody who's politically strong, tell them, call on communities of the poor to be working in partnership with you.
Absolutely.
It'll work regardless of how little money you have, because poor people have lots of resources that you haven't tapped.
Exactly. So, Ms. Victoria, I'm going to ask you a very unfair question. I'm going to tee that up now. But as the UN Special Rapporteur of the rights of Indigenous people, it's unfair for me to ask you how Indigenous people around the world feels and what they need, but if you can give us a taste from your position of some of the things that we can do better to uplift the rights of Indigenous people.
Well, I think that in the work that I have been doing for the past 40 years and this recent mandate that I have, the voices and the thinking of a lot of indigenous peoples is, first, for the world to stop racism and discrimination against them. This is the root cause of a lot of the problems that they face, because people who are racist or who are discriminatory think indigenous peoples are poor, they don't have knowledge, you know, they have backward, they are unscientific, which is all not true. You know, because we can see now the evidences are showing that actually the natural resource management systems of indigenous peoples are the ones that work. Right. Precisely because they work in harmony with nature and they depend on nature for their survival. So that's one. The second one is, of course, for the world, for the states and corporations to stop criminalizing them. You know, many of the people who are fighting against mining, extractive industries, uranium mining, oil and gas extraction, or agribusiness monoculture plantations, they are the ones who are criminalized. You know, the Global Witness data will show that last year was the deadliest year for environmental and land defenders, and they have 207 people who are killed, and 40% of those are indigenous leaders and activists. So that is how terrible the situation is as far as the repression against them is happening. So I think that's one of the things that I saw. In fact, my report is dealing with that now, on that's going to be presented before the Human Rights Council. So the demand is to call on the broader society to be in solidarity with those who are defending the lands and territories, so that they will be able to rise above all these situations of them being killed or being unfairly accused as terrorists. Even I myself, I was included in a list of so-called 600 terrorists in the Philippines, and we are supposed to be arrested at any time. So it's, if a rapporteur can be accused and put in a list like that, what more for the rest of indigenous peoples all over the world? So I think those are the key issues that they would like the world to hear about.
Thank you, and thank you for your work. We have just enough time, I think, for everyone to go through what will you have us do? We have in the audience here leaders from around the world. We're live streaming across the world now. What is your call to action? What will you have us do?
Make sure to include Indigenous peoples in the processes, at the tables, at the decision-making tables, wherever you're at, wherever you're working from. There are Indigenous peoples with solutions that need to be at the table. Those Indigenous scientists, community members, we've got examples across the country of solutions that community people and Indigenous communities are carrying out. So please get them to the table.
Yes. Amy.
This is to all of the adults with power in the room and watching this, and in general who will see this later. Remember who you're fighting for. You're fighting for the youth. You're fighting for the people who have been victims of these systems of oppression that have been causing climate change for decades and decades. It's so easy, I'm sure, if you're surrounded by, lobbyists are always in your ear all the time, and you're whisked into that world of elitism and policy, and it's easy to just get caught up in what's politically feasible, what makes me look good. This climate bill means that I would have passed something even though it does nothing. Let's pass this even though it doesn't help anything. Remember who you're actually fighting for. It's not for that news headline that you're a great governor who's taking climate action. You're fighting for the youth, and so I want you to remember when you're thinking of solutions, bring us to the table. Bring Indigenous people to the table, especially bring Indigenous youth to the table. Because we have a very ignored perspective of being the ones who are inheriting your mess, and we had no say in the creation of the systems that caused it, and yet we're paying the price for it. So please, bring us to the table and remember who you're fighting for. Don't just, slap climate on a bill and pass it. If it does nothing to help communities, if it does nothing to help youth, but is just to make you look good. I've seen a lot of self-congratulation of leaders. I've seen a lot of people get up there and talk about how great they are and how they're doing so much, but communities aren't seeing that. And so please stop self-congratulating yourself and work for the people.
There you go. Margolin 2020. Mia.
Mic drop. Okay. Put communities over corporations, put people over profits. It's as simple as that. There are solutions that we have that are already working in our communities. It's strategic as well. It's not just the moral thing to do, it's the strategic thing to do. Because if you want the support of the people, if you want the power of the people to be behind your solutions, make those solutions work for the people.
The messages that I'm getting from everybody is that the only way forward is to co-produce solutions. Don't underestimate the wisdom, the potential for finding answers, and for transformative development coming from below. There's energy, there's power, there is intelligence, there is knowledge, and the evidence that once things work for poor people, it goes like wildfire. So don't understand. So that people, there are lots of people here who are in the money business, people who are politicians, people who are in philanthropy, and people who are regulators, legal people. Talk to communities, and people like us who have organized networks, talk to us. We have lots of possibilities that we can share with you, but we need to find a common table, a common language, and equality for that conversation to be productive. That's not happening right now. All development solutions are coming from the top and being bumped down, and in most cases, what poor people do is they walk away from there. Yes. That's as much a waste as it is to ignore their presence. So be co-producers of solutions, not only on a horizontal level.
Absolutely. And Ms. Victoria, rounding us out.
Well, I agree. I support all the solutions being, the asks being made by my colleagues. Just to say that I think the most important thing that we need to really do is to change our own values, be humble, recognize the contributions of poor people who are in the margins, indigenous peoples, because they are the ones who have a lot at stake. That they depend solely on the natural world, on Mother Earth to produce this well-being for them. So I think that's first, to be humble enough to accept that you don't have all the solutions, and secondly, to make sure that you are able to really put the right ethics into into climate change solutions, and this should be guided by the human rights approach. Human rights means that the rights of those who are really being trampled upon should be looked into, and they should be put in the center of climate change solutions. So for indigenous peoples, that's one of the basic asks that they have of the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, a big round of applause for our amazing panelists. Thank you so much. So up next, we will be showing you a video. We've been talking a lot about solutions that work and that we need to have more in the community. This next video that we'll be showing is a highlight of what can be possible when we do this right and well and co-produce with the community itself.
Huron is a small farm worker city. It's got the highest percentage of Latinos for an incorporated city in the nation. Huron is surrounded by agriculture: lettuce, tomato, onions, garlic, watermelon. It's a very rich area, but it's high in poverty, and that's been the challenge. In this area, we have multiple sources of pollution that impact people's health. Apart from the pesticides that surround us, there's always a lot of dust. The creek alongside us that circles around us, we know it's got asbestos. When you're low income, access to quality health care is a challenge, more so if you don't have a ride. Valley Children's Hospital has a specialist for, respiratory and children's lungs. To get to Valley Children's Hospital, you either get in the car and arrive there in an hour, or you jump in the bus and you arrive there in 4 hours. And I remember as a kid being in the bus, I remember it being hot, similar to what it is right now, the sun hitting my face, waking up every time we made a stop somewhere, and there's like 13 stops in between, And it was a 3-hour ride before we finally got to Fresno. Green Raiteros, it's a program that provides rural ride-sharing accessibility to rural farm worker communities with electric vehicles. It's a service that is used to get families to their medical and social services appointments. Raiteros, it's an old practice, and it's been happening long before Uber. I was a child when my uncle was giving my mom and me a ride to Fresno, in his little Pinto car.
Tengo viviendo más de 50 años en Huron, y de raitera yo creo que tengo un poquito más de 15. Pero yo batallé mucho cuando estaba trabajando, cuando estaban mis hijas chicas, yo batallé mucho porque no tenía raite. Había veces que me dejaban con el lonche en la calle o esperando el raite para que me llevaran a trabajar, y ya era de perder el día. Y luego había veces que a mis hijas las dejaba al bus de la escuela y andaba yo buscando raite, necesitaba raite para llevarlas a sus clases. Y yo sola pensé, dije, pero yo me voy a dedicar a dar raites.
Recalling that memory of going to the hospital and knowing of my raiteras giving people rides, a lot of rides to Valley Children's Hospital, because a lot of children have asthma. That's when the Air Resources Board offered grants for a ride-sharing pilot program with electric vehicles. Well, here we are in what used to be a diesel mechanic shop. We've been able to acquire it so that we could develop the Green Raiteros headquarters. It's going to be a huge resource here for the community of Huron and for the county as well. It'll be the first private electric vehicle maintenance and dispatch center. Families will be able to come and set their appointments ahead of schedule, or come and hang out and wait for their ride. We'll have a community resource center, computers, Wi-Fi. My vision for Huron is not just providing the services that the people need. Part of the vision is to try to make Huron a greener city, if possible, the greenest farm worker city in the country. Green Raiteros is an attempt to bring about a solution that'll take care of 5 problems: economic justice, environmental justice, climate justice, health justice, and transportation justice. So we want it to be part of our mission to expand the electric vehicle and clean transportation in the valley.
I am thrilled and excited to introduce the next speaker. He is a giant in the work of advancing a just world for ourselves and especially for disadvantaged communities. Dr. Robert Bullard is often described, yes, though you guys already know him, right? He is described as the father of environmental justice. He is the former dean of public affairs at Texas University, Texas Southern University. He is a distinguished professor of urban planning and environmental policy, the founding director of Environmental Justice Resource Center at Clark University. He's an award-winning author of 18 books that addresses, hold on here, just hold on, sustainable development, environmental racism, urban land use, industrial facility siting, community reinvestment, housing, transportation, climate justice, disasters, emergency response, community resilience, smart growth, and regional equity. This man knows everything. So please give a round of applause to Dr. Robert Bullard.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert Bullard. I'm a sociologist. I'm an environmental sociologist, and I'm pleased to say that I am an environmentalist. This morning, I want to give you a few words looking at the whole issue of why equity matters when we deal with environment, climate, health, housing, transportation. I've written 18 books that cover all the areas that was mentioned, but it's just one book, but don't tell anybody. If you talk about housing, you could put housing and justice or fairness. Or if you talk about transportation, you could talk about just transportation. As a matter of fact, I wrote a book called Just Transportation, Dismantling Race and Class Barriers to Mobility. So when we start to try to formulate what the words for today is. Intersectionality, how things connect, and justice, fairness, and equity can connect all the things that we're talking about when we talk about climate. And so when we talk about climate change is more than parts per million. It's more than greenhouse gases. It's also about justice, fairness, and equity. And when plans are being made and when policies are being formulated, I think we can take some important lessons from the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit that we held, next month will be 27 years ago in Washington, D.C. And the guiding theme behind the principles of environmental justice, 17 of them, is that people most impacted must speak for themselves, and that when policies are being made and plans are being formulated, they must be in the room and they must be at the table to speak for themselves and decide for themselves what their destiny will be. So we're talking about self-determination. That was true in 27 years ago, and it's true today here at the summit. So when we talk about voices that oftentimes are silent, communities, populations that are invisible, I wrote a book called Invisible Houston, The Black Experience in Boom and Bust. I wrote that book 31 years ago. There are still invisible communities that we need to make visible, and policies are being made oftentimes that increase their invisibility and their vulnerability. The Freedom to Breathe bus tour that took place last week that crossed the United States made real and writ large real stories that tracked what was happening on the ground in communities like Shell Bluff, Georgia, with nuclear power plants, or in Pensacola, Florida, with pits surrounding them, dumps, holding ponds. Miami, Florida, where climate gentrification is pushing people, out of their community. And the whole idea in Port Arthur, Texas, before Hurricane Harvey, sacrifice zones with all kinds of petrochemical plants surrounding communities. The benefits don't accrue to the fence line communities. People drive in, do their jobs, leave. The people who are stuck on the fence line get pollution, they don't get the jobs, and they get sick. Africa Town, the last stop for Africans that were illegally brought to this country in 1865 or 1867, somewhere around in there. That community survived slavery, but it may not survive toxic racism. We talk about New Orleans post-Katrina, what's happening in that area 13 years after the flood. Communities now having to be evacuated because the land is sinking, Native Indigenous people. We talk about Houston, where I live. Before Hurricane Harvey, there were fence line communities along the Houston Ship Channel that experienced tremendous pollution from along, the petrochemical corridor. We are a petropolis, but at the same time, having the world's largest concentration of industries, refineries, we also generate a lot of pollution. We also are home to one of the world's largest medical centers. Sounds oxymoronic. So when we talk about this issue of what climate change is and who it impacts and why we need to have inclusion, have we then built equity analysis into all of our policies and frame, climate change is here. It's already happening, impacting the most vulnerable populations first, worst, and longest. This is true in this country, and it's true all around the globe. And so we talk about climate change is going to make it harder to breathe. And most people that I know, breathing is not voluntary response. Breathing is life. More bad air days, more asthma attacks. African Americans and Latino are sent to the hospital and die from asthma 3 to 5 times greater than for whites. Why? We are most likely to live in non-attainment areas, bad air cities. Already, climate change is going to make it worse. Heat islands effect. We talk about all these issues. Zip code is still the most potent predictor of of health and well-being, and all zip codes are not created equal. When we talk about this whole question of climate change amplifying and exacerbating existing inequalities, it will further create marginalized communities and further push marginalization as commonplace. And when we talk about what happens when resources are distributed into communities after disasters, as a matter of fact, studies are now showing that recovery dollars as they're being spent actually increase inequality and widen the gap between rich and poor. And communities of color are less likely to see benefits from that kind of spending. I mean, as a matter of fact, that pattern fits a title of a book just so happened that I wrote. It's called The Wrong Complexion for Protection, and how government response to disasters endangers African American communities and communities of color. And so, finally, we have to create an inclusionary climate adaptation plan, mitigation plan, policies going forward. It's important that we do that, otherwise is half-baked. Thank you very much.
Please welcome the CEO of Realdania, Jesper Nygaard.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is, as it just said, Jesper Nygaard. I'm the CEO of Realdania. Realdania is a philanthropic organization, same size as Rockefeller, but from another continent. I come from Little Denmark in the northern part of Europe. Our mission as philanthropists is to improve the quality of life for everyone through the built environment. Before I continue to make some opening remarks for this panel session, I would like to introduce two fantastic mayors we have for this panel today. And the first one I would like to introduce is Mayor Biskupski from Salt Lake City, Utah, here in the United States. Mayor Biskupski, please enter the stage. Mayor Jackie Biskupski took office of Salt Lake City. She became the mayor on January 4th, 2016. Her political career also includes 13 years as a member of the Utah House of Representatives from 1998 to 2011. So very warm welcome to you. The other one is the Honorable Mayor Sowa from Accra in Ghana in Africa. Please enter the stage. Welcome so much.
Thank you. How are you,
I'm doing well.
Mayor Mohammed Ajay Sowa, I think it's almost correct, was appointed mayor of Accra in March 2017. He's a social entrepreneur with more than 23 years of work in local economic development and small business development. He holds a master in local economic development from the Institute of Local Government Studies in Ghana. So a warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for participating, and thank you for your leadership. I would like to start to point out why I am here in San Francisco. One of the reasons is that I have a number of positions being the CEO of Realdania, but the most relevant one to this one is I'm a board member of C40 Global Leadership Group. Realdania is, together with Bloomberg Philanthropies and the UK-based foundation called CIF, Children Investment Fund Foundation, one of the three strategic funders behind C40. C40 is a global network of cities and mayors committed to combat climate change, and C40 has 97 members on 6 continents. Mayors, cities, and the staff of C40 is doing a very important and a very great job. Mayors of C40 cities around the globe represent millions of people. They are trying to make a more just world and trying to build a global movement on inclusive climate action. Also thanks to the support of leading networks such as C40. Cities has been instrumental in coordinating the effort to achieve this broad commitment of fair cities of the world. With an inclusive climate action program, C40 is supporting leading cities worldwide to co-deliver climate policies and to help to create better job opportunities, higher living standards, and to improve public and environmental health for all. And today we can announce this important pledge. Recognizing that climate change is an issue of poverty and fighting social inequality, there has been a strong and a tight link between 30 cities representing close to 100 million people. They have pledged to deliver inclusive climate action that benefits citizens' equality. That is very important, and once more I want to thank you so much for your leadership in that pledge. Mayors from 30 cities has committed to increase community-led development, inclusive climate action, and infrastructure projects that achieve major environmental, health, social, and economic benefits in low-income and vulnerable communities. Climate change is unfair. It's created by the few and will hit the many hardest and will hit the many strongest. So it's very important that we do something. And one of the speakers earlier this morning said, it's not only about fighting, it's also about winning. So I would like you all to help me to give a round of applause for the fairest city mayors coming from Accra, Athens, Barcelona, Bridgeport, Buenos Aires, Cape Town, Chicago, Denver, Durban, Guadalajara, Hong Kong in China, Houston, Johannesburg, Los Angeles, Medellin, Mexico City, Milan, Montreal, New York City, Paris, Philadelphia, Salt Lake City, San Francisco, Santiago, Seattle, Sydney, Tel Aviv, Tokyo, Toronto, and Washington, D.C. Please give them a hand. It is so fantastic that you are here, and I'm so happy to start a conversation with the two of you. And I would like to start with you, Mayor Sowa. I'm coming from Denmark, and you know, somebody said once that something's rotten in the state of Denmark. And a lot of people remember that in 2009, in COP15, it was not a success in Denmark. It was only in Paris the success came. A lot of people said that this COP15 was a failure. But what I saw in Denmark in 2009 was that the head of states couldn't do it. But what we learned from Copenhagen is that we have to include cities, we have to include NGOs, we have to include businesses, individuals. We have as people, and you have as cities and mayors, we have to do something about it. It's important that the head of states is doing it, but we have to do something ourselves too. So you are one of the 30 mayors who have delivered inclusive climate action through the pledging to benefit all citizens equality, to join this climate change, tackle and inequality together. Why have you made this pledge, and what does it mean if you want to be concrete in Accra?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to beautiful and wonderful ladies and gentlemen who are in this audience. I think that Copenhagen didn't fail, but it's also triggered and sustained the conversation, and eventually we got to Paris. And for us in Accra, the big issue is that as much as all of us are concerned about climate change, we think that the triggers of climate change are very local, and if all parties will look at their local environment, scan it, and identify what triggers climate change and tackle it head on, collectively all of us will be tackling what we call a global challenge. So I've had great and wonderful speakers since I came, and you are from Denmark. I've had Norway sharing their experiences on biking. I've had great speakers from America and my wonderful sister on my left, and they're also sharing their experiences on how they want to improve upon climate change by ensuring that they introduce more of electronic vehicles on the road. But for those of us in Africa, as our system is also an environment is a bit different. So we're looking at the issues from the local perspective, and then to tackle it head on. Climate change is affecting us. For those of us in Africa, for a long period of years has taken issues of climate change not seriously because we live in the tropics. We get a lot of rain, we have farmlands, everything. But we are the hardest hit, as I speak to you now. Rainfall pattern has changed. It rains heavily within a very short span and affect farm crops because we largely rely on rainwater. Right. Sea level is also rising. Accra, it's located on the coast of West Africa, and it's affecting artisanal also and fishing as well. So we are looking at all these issues, and for us, the issues and what triggers climate change could be sanitation issues. And so how do we address sanitation issues? What also affect us is about pollution from the type of vehicles that also we use. But we can make significant progress as we have introduced the bus rapid transport system to reduce the number of vehicles that comes into the city, because the middle income class, everybody is clamoring for use of vehicles. So as you provide an alternative and efficient use of it, that will also be beneficial to them. And then the type of buildings that I have said it, that we seem to be looking at developing in a more American way. So as the skyline of Accra is changing, people are putting up buildings that are very similar to Europe and in America, which of course, the type of building is to withstand the kind of winter weather. And we are in the summer weather, 365 days. So how do we put up buildings that are also energy efficient, compliant? And these are the concerns which we are addressing on to tackle climate change issues. So globally, America has issues, Europe has issues, Africa has issues, but let's look at the issues that affect us locally and address it so that we'll be addressing the global challenge. And that's why we are committed to it, because it's affecting us, inequalities. I mean, if you look at the world today, renewable energy is heavily subsidized in the global north. For us in the global south, that enjoys summer throughout the year, we are paying high cost of renewable energy. We think that is quite unfair, and for climate change to be successful, then the strategies must be fair, it must be equitable, and be inclusive, so that all of us will drive the change that we are all yearning for.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So thank you for stepping out up on the pledge, and thank you for this very important point that you have to share your knowledge, and the rest of you have to share the knowledge, and we have to use our knowledge together to make a better world. So thank you so much. Right. And Mayor Biskupski, this incredible, powerful summit here in San Francisco is demonstrating the extraordinary efforts of civil society, communities and local leaders in tackling climate change and inequality together. The two major and two crucial challenges of the time we are living in right now. Could you say a little bit about how local governments can support this movement for a more just and a more inclusive climate action? And why is it important to a city like yours?
Well, I think it's similar reason for cities across this country. We know historically the way our cities were structured. The wealthy were on one side of the freeway, and low-income families, people living in poverty, were on the other side. And then, lo and behold, that's where our industry was being developed, where you had greater levels of pollution coming from your power plants and your industrial factories. And so that inequity that is built into my city is built into cities all across this country. And we as mayors have an obligation to change that, to make sure that as we build a resilient community, that we are looking at these inequities and understanding them. And the best way to do that is to bring people in who are experiencing this disparity firsthand. And so as we or I put people on boards and commissions, I am heavily recruiting those who have traditionally been oppressed in some form or another. We want individuals to be serving on these boards and commissions that are giving me and my city council advice on public policy. And we don't just want them in the room, we want them leading the conversations, because that is where we will learn how to best make the most progress in the quickest fashion. The other piece to all of this is, you have to create programs that help those with the least. If we are doing programs that further cement inequities into our communities, you are working against progress. And so our programs are there to help low-income families with, home repairs that make their home more resilient, but also make them more efficient. Or we look at, how we have in our city, for the very first time, a transit master plan that is very inclusive of our low-income neighborhoods, and that is a funded plan. That has never happened in the history of my city. We're doing affordable housing in a way that is green. And yes, you can build affordable and it can be green. Everyone needs to understand that. And we are doing it in Salt Lake City. Yes. So you have to also make sure that the work you're doing can be replicated. And so other communities in the state of Utah have adopted our 100% renewable by 2032 agreements with our power company. And today there are 4 of us that are part of the 80 cities in this country that are going 100% renewable. So that is a big commitment in a state where they, are just finally in the governor's office talking about how climate change is real this year. So a lot going on.
Thank you so much. And your point about you as a mayor and as the official city who can give inspiration to civil society, but civil society can also give inspiration to you. I think that's a very important interaction. We have very, very short time, and I have this maybe very difficult task. Is it possible to have 2 politicians in 3 words to answer a question? I will do that. I will do that.
Give us 1 minute.
If you, in one sentence, Mayor Sowa, what is a just world for you?
Well, a just world for me, it's simply, as we look at the local issues, the rich and those who are the pollutants should contribute to the less developed so that we have a very fair and equitable world, because the climate change
distribute
climate change
the wealth
affect everybody. So once my issues affect everybody, you should also be able to contribute.
Thank you. Mr. Biszupski, could you, you have 10 seconds. Could you do it in 2, 3, 4 words?
Yes. People need to be empowered, and sometimes that means self-empowered as well. Use your voice, be heard, and be a part of the solution.
Thank you so much. That was successful in less than 1 minute, 2 sentences. Just if some of you out there are sitting wondering, could I contribute to that pledge as well? Or could I go back to my mayor, do something? Please contact C40 if you want to learn more about the pledge, if you want to contribute to it. It's not a formal declaration, it's an instrument to do something about poverty. So thank you so much, the 2 of you, for your great leadership. Thank you for all of you to participate in this little panel. And I think we should use Mr. Becerra's word in the beginning of this morning to say, keep on fighting, but not just fighting, keep on winning. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please welcome Executive Director of Culture Strike, Fabiana Rodriguez.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are almost at the end. I'm the hors d'oeuvre to the big dinner that's coming next, because who you're going to hear from next, very powerful, so just hang in there. We are a little bit short on time. I am an artist. I was born here in Oakland, California. My parents are immigrants from Peru. And I grew up in a very dirty community, in a community that is plagued by asthma as a result of fossil fuels burning up and down the freeway. And as an artist, here in California, not only do we have the home of tech, but we also are a home of culture. Hollywood is here in California. We're the home of innovation. And so my ask to you is to consider the role of artists and culture makers in addressing the climate chaos, because what's needed is we need to completely reimagine our relationship to energy. We need to completely reimagine our relationship to the natural world. And guess where that can happen? In film, television, music, right? Because this is the world after, Black Panther. Where were the solar panels in Black Panther, right? How do we leverage the power of art and culture? Because culture precedes political change. A policy change is the final manifestation of an idea whose time has come. And so those of us who are working in the cultural sector, we can present the new ideas, we can present the new ways of thinking, and really, really reimagine our worldview and center those who are most affected. Thank you. Thank you for taking photos of my art. This is my art. Also, I just must point out, Governor Brown, you know that since 2011, Governor Brown has approved 20,000 oil and gas extraction sites, and many of them are in communities of color and in low-income communities. So it's really urgent that when we talk about solutions, we need those who are most impacted, and we can't have false solutions. So I ask for all of you to help tell Governor Brown that California can't be all up cozy with the oil industry, and that's what's happening. And we need to address that. We need to recognize that it's not just fossil fuels, it's agriculture, it's animal agriculture, and guess what? California is an agricultural state. So with that, I'm going to introduce next my friend, my mentor, as a young Latina growing up in the United States. We're invisible. Besides Frida Kahlo, Selena, we're always like, why are we so invisible? Well, it's because of racial inequality. But there's one woman in particular who I've always been inspired by her activism. I've been inspired by her resilience, the fact that she loves to dance. She's a vegetarian. She is just like out there, OG gangster, just changing the world. And her name is Dolores Huerta. And she is the co-founder of the United Farm Workers and the founder and director of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. And most importantly, just somebody who has really dedicated her life to intersectional social change. And she's fighting for those who are at the front lines, the campesinos, the workers who are working and producing all of our food. Welcome, Dolores Huerta.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here today, for joining the battle. It's a big surprise to me and probably to many of you that in California, guess what? We are now listed as one of the #1 cities, one of the #1 states in terms of global warming. Who knew? Here we are, the vanguard of the environment and fighting global warming, etc. And I am here to represent Bakersfield, California, which is the #1 city in the country that is noted for global warming. This is according to a book by Thomas Monroe. And of course, when we talk about the global warming, we're also the #1 city when it comes to bad air quality, pollution, pesticides, oil-producing county, the county of Kern, and of course, the #1 in terms of health issues. #1 in cancer causing, asthma, valley fever, teen pregnancies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have all of these things in Kern County, but there are some bright lights. Our mayor, a young man named Jose Gorola, who's only 25 years old, actually was able to get his city, the city of Auburn, California, to ban fracking, okay? To ban fracking. Now, this is a very brave step because here we have this city of Auburn, which is in the county of Kern, as I mentioned before, which the major industries are oil and agriculture. Okay, these are the two major things that we do have in our area. And in addition to that, we have the huge use of pesticides in our community also. So you might say that we are kind of burdened with all of the wrong things that we have to do. So then how do we find the solutions? Well, we have to, and I'm going to quote Gloria Steinem, it's called the personal and also the political. The personal and the political. So when we think about the personal things that we have to do, we have to think in terms of our personal behaviors. And I would like to quote Mahatma Gandhi. You know, this is the 150th year of Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. And Mahatma Gandhi said, we have to live simply so that others can simply live. And when we have to think of our own behaviors in terms of our materialism that we have in our society, then we can think of a lot of things that we can do in terms of how do we, you know, stop a lot of the pollution and pollution that we have in our world. Because I do believe that we probably produce a lot of things that are really just junk, right? Things that we really don't need and need to get rid of. And of course, as we heard from the previous speakers, we know that the people that are affected by all of this manufacturing of things that we don't need are always the poor people, you know, the people of color, the farm workers who are the victims of many of these pesticides that we have in our society. And, you know, I think of Standing Rock. You know, this is the brave efforts that were made in North Dakota to stop this pipeline. And when I was at Standing Rock, I was really amazed. And we think of the indigenous people ways, and we heard from indigenous people earlier today. And the indigenous people of the way that they lived. And in Standing Rock, here you had people that were sharing. You had people that were sharing water. You had people that were sharing wood. And they were doing all of this to make it possible for everybody to survive. And doing the protesting to stop this pipeline that was going through their reservations that they knew was going to pollute many, not only of their native lands, but many of the people that were going to be affected when these oil pipelines burst. So I think that we really have some lessons that we can learn, and as we heard earlier today from many of the indigenous people in our community. But at the same time, I think that we have to think in terms of our own personal behaviors. So I am saying this, that we have to educate and have to organize, we have to motivate, and then we have to advocate. Because if we elect good progressive people to office, and by the way, it's not just about voting, it's about campaigning and getting out there and getting other people to vote so that we can make sure that we could get very good people elected. Just here, again, in our golden state of California, we just lost a major piece of legislation to have clean, safe drinking water for all of the people in California, because we have many places, especially in the Central Valley that I'm talking about, where people do not have clean, safe drinking water. They have to pay water bills, and then they have to, at the same time, buy bottled water. And unfortunately, this bill that we had in our state legislature by Senator Bill Monning did not pass, even though it would have only cost people 95 cents on their water bill. And that would have created a fund to clean up all of the toxics in our drinking water, and it didn't pass. This is a disgrace, and it never should have happened. So we know that we have to make sure that we have a political agenda and we have a personal agenda. And if we do this, I think that we could really make it happen and get on our way to have a clean, safe environment, but also to stop global warming. So I'm going to ask you all the question. Do you think that we should go and do whatever we can do to make sure that we can stop global warming? What do we say? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, do you think that we've got the power to do it? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to ask you then, I'm going to ask you the question, and I'm going to ask you the question, who has the power? We have the power. Okay, what kind of power? So can we shout that out very, very loud? Okay, I'm going to say it. I want you to shout out really loud. Who's got the power? We have the power. I think you didn't really mean it. Okay, let's try it one more time. Let's wake everybody up here, okay? Who's got the power? We have the power. What kind of power? People power. All right, let's get out there and do it. Si se puede, yes we can. Thank you very much.